Congratulations. Congratulations, America. According to people who keep track of these things, America just passed its 400th mass shooting this year, which means with 2023 just halfway over, fingers crossed, when it comes to gun deaths, we're on track to making this the deadliest year on record. Congratulations, America. This is what we try. This is what we try for in a small town, right? I'm from a big town these days, New York City. Jason Aldean, country star. You know what you should try in a small town? Algebra. Try it. Try that in your small town. When did willful ignorance become a career choice? Watch the music video for Try That in a Small Town, Jason Aldean. It's a pro-gun, anti-Black Lives Matter, racist, pro-cop, authoritarian homage to white nationalism and, of course, fascism. I know that because Ted Nugent says he loves it. It's a celebration of white pride and ignorance, perpetuating the big lie that the police were innocent bystanders in the protests following the murder of George Floyd. The big lie that Black Lives Matter and Antifa were responsible for the looting and violence, when in fact every single study shows the Black Lives Matter protests were peaceful until the police showed up. The looting was done by outside agitators, white people, cops, and guess what? Antifa doesn't exist. I'm going to keep repeating this. Christopher Wray, the head of the FBI, a Republican, testified under oath before Congress that Antifa doesn't exist. It's an ideology. Somebody, maybe this Jason Aldean, I would love it if you could give me somebody from Black Lives Matter who was an analog to Kyle Rittenhouse. That doesn't exist. There's nobody from Black Lives Matter who showed up with AR-15s and killed 2 people, injured 1. So Jason Aldean is a POS. You know, I'm born in New York, live in Manhattan, but I was raised in a small town in Jersey. And Jason Aldean, you're not singing about the small town I grew up in. You're singing about a very specific small town, Jason Aldean. And, you know, I know the rules. I'm a blue state coastal elitist, so I'm supposed to, you know, patronize you, feel sorry for you, and not lord our superiority over you, because then, you know, we're afraid you're going to go off clinging to your flag, your guns, and religion. Thing is, I'm too old. I'm not running for office. So let me just tell Jason Aldean and his fans, we all know exactly what small town Jason Aldean is singing about. It's a small town in Oklahoma, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Missouri, where it's all white. That's the small town Jason Aldean is singing about. Now, objectively speaking, and I know I'm going to push some people away by saying this, but it's the truth. Objectively speaking, by all yardsticks, life expectancy, infant mortality, drug use, drug overdoses, traffic fatalities, education level, by all yardsticks, the small town Jason Aldean is singing about is infinitely inferior by all measures to the small town I grew up in and that most Americans grew up in. It's why Jason Aldean and his fans are so racist and angry and homophobic and, of course, out of shape. It's why they cling to their guns, their flag, and religion, because that's all they have. They have nothing because they are nothing. They are physically, intellectually, and morally inferior. And deep down, they know that. It's why, like trained seals at the Jason Aldean concert I saw, they yelp USA, 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 like trained seals, because that's all they have. All they have is the chant. They don't love America because America doesn't love them. America is embarrassed by Jason Aldean and his fans. He knows that. His fans know that. So they wave the flag and shout USA and call themselves patriots because that's the only way they get to participate in America. Nobody wants to hire these sloths. They barely pay taxes. That is the small town Jason Aldean is singing about. And I would feel sorry for him and his fans, but they're just a bunch of whiny pussies who would rather prattle on with their imagined white grievances than make something of themselves. Try this in your small town, Jason Aldean. Try and find a woman who doesn't reek of cigarettes, stale beer, and her father's aftershave. Try that in your small town, Jason Aldean, that you sing about. You backwater, foul-smelling, uneducated, racist, limp dick Neanderthal. You're not celebrating a small town. You're celebrating the small minds in the deep south or out west, where you better be white and stupid if you want to fit in. Try this in your small town, Jason Aldean. Try living without the largesse of the federal government. Try living without the evil federal government subsidizing all your meth labs and insulin with all the taxes paid by those coastal blue state elitists that you have nothing but contempt for. You know talent rube, you hayseed. Try that in your small town. You represent the taker states, the taker cities. We know who you are and where you're located. You're the takers. You receive more from the federal government than you pay into it. And we're tired of subsidizing your cheesy white asses and getting nothing but resentment in return. Try this in your small town, Jason Aldean. Invent something the world wants to buy. I know exactly which small towns Jason Aldean is singing about. He's singing about the small towns that lead America in drug overdoses, infant mortality, gun homicides, high school dropout rates, traffic deaths, heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. That's the small town Jason Aldean is singing about. Check the numbers out. Check the numbers out from the CDC, the numbers that go state by state, city by city. That small town Jason Aldean is singing about, well, it's not Deerfield, Massachusetts. It's not Brattleboro, Vermont, Hyde Park, New York, or Summit, New Jersey. The small town Jason Aldean is singing about has no black people, no Hispanics, no members of the LGBTQ community, no Jews, Sikhs, or Arabs. It also has no abortion clinics, decent hospitals, doctors, clean drinking water, or civil liberties. I know the small town Jason Aldean is singing about. It's where the sheriff keeps a special house out by where the old Dairy Queen used to be. And once a week, the sheriff empties out the women's jail and brings everyone back to that house for a little rape and relaxation. I know the small town Jason Aldean is singing about, where the town elders are prune-faced, involuntary incels, wearing cowboy hats and mom jeans with 60-inch waists, who can only get an erection by watching the secret GoPro feed from the state fair outhouse. Try this in your small town, Jason Aldean. Try a healthy, loving relationship. Try that in your small town. Try this in your small town, Jason Aldean. Finding a woman who thinks you're a real man. I love the lyrics to this song. These are actual lyrics. Cuss out a cop, spit in his face, stomp on the flag, and light it up. Yeah, you think you're tough. Who spits in a cop's face? Who does that? And by the way, that is tough. If I spat in a cop's face, Jason Aldean, I would consider that being tough. The lyrics, got a gun that my granddad gave me. Yeah. He's singing about the gun his granddad gave him. Here, son, here's my gun. Now use it to take me out of my misery. Just shoot me. A pine coffin perched on layaway must be better than this small town we're stuck in. These are actual lyrics. This is an actual lyric. Full of good old boys, raised up right. If you're looking for a fight, yeah. If you're looking for a fight, I got my grandpa's gun because I'm too doughy and out of shape to use my fists, so I need a gun. Because I'm out of shape. I can't even run away from you. So I need a gun because I can't actually fight you. I'm not that tough. And I'm too stupid to learn martial arts. So I got a gun my granddaddy gave me so I can talk tough while inhaling Dorito dust and jerking off to animal porn because every woman in this small town knows to stay away from me. Broken marriages, broken children, child support, credit card debt, diabetes, gout, a sore ass from cheap Mexican food, and a car that reeks of bong water and counterfeit Axe body spray. That's the small town Jason Aldean is singing about, where the only thing you have to be proud of is being white. The point I'm making is we must love one another here in America and celebrate our differences. And we need to be understanding when it comes to the discontent and frustrations of our red state brothers and sisters. That's the message. Watch the video. It has now become, Jimmy Dore, Joe Rogan, Jason Aldean. It is now a career path. Ignorance is now a career path. Elon Musk announced that Twitter is getting rid of its bird logo and replacing it with an X. Instead of an X, why doesn't Twitter change it to a Z, since most of the people Elon retweets are rooting for Russia? Have you noticed this? You see the Z? That's the symbol for Russia in the war in Ukraine. For some reason, the only tweets I see when I'm stupid enough to go on Twitter, I just get tweets that are pro-Putin, anti-Zelensky. The longer I stay away from Twitter, the happier I am. Well, you're going to be hearing a lot in the coming months about Donald Trump's attempt to defraud the United States government by helping to orchestrate phony elector slates in 7 key battleground states after the 2020 presidential election. You're going to be hearing about a criminal conspiracy that involved Donald Trump, his chief of staff, Mark Meadows, and several key Republicans in states like Michigan, Arizona, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, New Mexico, and Georgia. You're going to be hearing a lot about this, I promise you, the phony elector scheme. We're not just talking about strong-arm tactics. We're talking about Trump's lawyers, Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, Kenneth Chesebro, and John Eastman, conspiring with state Republicans to convene phony electors with forged documents to meet in state capitals and then send counterfeit slates of electors to Congress and the National Archives to be tallied on January 6 for the certification of the presidential election. I promise you, you are going to be hearing a lot about the phony electors. The Michigan State Attorney General is already prosecuting 16 phony electors, and already they are beginning to flip. They're saying they were misled by Trump's lawyers, Republican Party hacks in Michigan who didn't tell them what they were signing or why they were signing it. You're going to be hearing a lot about the Electoral Count Act of 1867 and the 12th Amendment. The phony elector scheme will most assuredly be prosecuted by Special Counsel Jack Smith. It's being prosecuted already in Michigan, and we're now seeing the Arizona State Attorney General beginning to investigate the phony slate of electors that Donald Trump and Republicans in Arizona organized to defraud the United States government. Meanwhile, the special counsel, Jack Smith, his trial in Miami, charging Donald Trump with the mishandling of classified documents and violating the Espionage Act. Seriously, Donald Trump has been indicted for violating the Espionage Act. That trial will not be postponed until after the 2024 presidential election, as Donald Trump petitioned the judge to decide. The judge, an appointee from Trump, Judge Eileen Cannon, who's overseeing the trial, ruled that the trial must begin in May of 2024. The Fulton County District Attorney, Fani Willis, has convened 2 grand juries looking into Donald Trump's attempts to overturn the 2020 presidential election in Georgia. You all remember his infamous call to the Secretary of State, Raffensperger, ordering him, strong-arming him into finding more votes. Well, there are now reports that Fani Willis, the Fulton County District Attorney down in Georgia, she too is now looking into the phony elector scheme as well. Trump's attorneys asked a judge, a Supreme Court judge in Georgia, to stop this investigation, but Trump's attorneys were rebuffed. Meanwhile, The Guardian has an exclusive report that Fani Willis, the Fulton County District Attorney in Georgia, might be planning to prosecute Trump's election meddling under state racketeering laws. Also, she may also charge Trump and his lawyers for computer trespass after Trump's lawyers strong-armed their way into polling stations and were able to download the contents of several voting machines, which were then put online to crowdsource the search for voter fraud. This is all illegal, all illegal. There are now reports that Fulton County DA Fani Willis is expecting to hand down a series of indictments charging Trump with election crime sometime next month. The mayor of Atlanta, the police chief, and Fani Willis are reportedly coordinating for fear of violence in the streets. Why would they think that going after Trump might result in violence in the streets? There are also reports that special counsel Jack Smith is focusing on Trump's election interference in Georgia as well. Republican Governor Brian Kemp told USA Today on Sunday that he has been contacted by Jack Smith's office. Kemp, who voted for Trump, refused to cooperate with the president. He turned down requests to assist Trump and his lawyers in trying to either find more votes for Trump or convene a special session of the state legislature to overturn the election results based on the fake claims of voter fraud. Those are fake claims. We are on the indictment watch. I don't know what's going to happen, but we're waiting on special counsel Jack Smith's first series of indictments charging Donald Trump for the crimes he committed in the lead up to and during January 6. Now, this is conjecture. I believe the longer we wait for this indictment, I think the worse it gets for Donald Trump. Again, I don't know anything, but my gut, which is always wrong, my gut tells me that special counsel Jack Smith is pushing Trump's former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, into such a tight corner that he will have no choice but to rat Trump out. I think Mark Meadows is going to rat Trump out either as a cooperating witness or an immunized witness. This is my gut. I think special counsel Jack Smith can get Mark Meadows to go full Michael Cohen. I think he will spill it all, and then that will be it for Trump. And here's why I think Mark Meadows might rat Trump out. Because Mark Meadows is a rat. He really is a rat. If you were to ask me of all the characters involved in the Trump administration, I more than Steve Bannon and Stephen Miller, I think Mark Meadows is the worst of the worst. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about Mark Meadows. And what we all must remember is Meadows was Trump's chief of staff. That means Mark Meadows ran the White House. Now, Trump never lets anybody get too much authority, and chiefs of staff in the Trump White Houses were always undermined. But when push comes to shove, chiefs of staff are like the CEO of the Oval Office. Whatever goes on inside the Oval Office, the chief of staff knows it or orchestrated it. Mark Meadows, chief of staff, he was the last chief of staff, he can't hide behind executive privilege. A judge said no. Meadows cannot hide behind executive privilege. He had to testify before Jack Smith's grand jury, and he did last month. Now, perhaps there might have been some stuff during the grand jury testimony that Mark Meadows held back, claiming executive privilege. Who knows? All I know is if Mark Meadows somehow became a cooperating witness or an immunized witness, I have to believe we're looking at jail time for Donald Trump. Again, I don't have a clue. This is conjecture. All I know is this. It was a week ago Sunday that Trump received a letter from special counsel Jack Smith telling him he's the target of an investigation regarding January 6th. This is the first prosecution that Jack Smith is going to perform regarding January 6th. Now, according to all the reporting, no other individual has received a similar target letter. Again, I'm usually wrong, but it looks like special counsel Jack Smith is going to lop off the head of the snake. He's not working his way up the food chain when it comes to January 6th. He's going straight for Trump. And the number of high-level Trump appointees and political associates who have been marched before Jack Smith's grand jury in Washington is positively staggering. It suggests the following. That to avoid prison, most, if not all, of Donald Trump's closest associates have cooperated. They've been forced to testify under oath, and they don't want to be charged with perjury. It suggests that many, if not all, have been offered immunity and or made some sort of proffer agreement. A proffer agreement is a deal that falls a little bit short of immunity. But the big fish, as I see it in the next couple of weeks, is prosecuting Trump and only prosecuting Trump for January 6th. And you do that by getting Chief of Staff Mark Meadows to flip. That's what I think. I'm always wrong, okay? But I think if they get Mark Meadows to pull a Michael Cohen, that's it for Trump. We know that there were countless crimes committed by high-level Trump officials. And we know that Jack Smith has all of them dead to rights. But the target letter is now a week old. Why the delay in the indictments? Everyone who worked for Trump, who assisted Trump, who lied for him and covered for him, they know right now, this period between the target letter being received by Donald Trump and the indictments, this period, this interim period, they all know this is do or die time. Right now, the clock is ticking. They have to make their deal with special counsel Jack Smith, or they will be indicted, either along with Trump or after Trump. Probably after Trump, since there are time constraints. The time constraints dictate that Trump must be indicted immediately because the election calendar hangs over all these proceedings. I know nothing, but I am hoping the reason the indictment hasn't come down yet is because Jack Smith, the special counsel, is still pressuring Mark Meadows, Trump's chief of staff. He's still pressuring Mark Meadows into becoming a cooperating witness or an immunized witness. And if that happens, it all comes crumbling down around Donald Trump. I can't stress this enough. Mark Meadows is the cornerstone in prosecuting Trump for January 6th. And you get Meadows to cooperate in exchange for immunity, it is over. Then again, I'm always wrong. Mark Meadows, that was Trump's chief of staff. He is a right-wing, self-serving pubic lice on the body politic and one of the founders of the Freedom Caucus. He has been silent for at least 6 months, doesn't speak to anybody, which means he's terrified. We know that last month he testified before Jack Smith's grand jury under oath. To save his own hide, and Mark Meadows has been known to do that, Mark Meadows could possibly have given away the entire game and is prepared to give away the entire game because as White House chief of staff, he just doesn't know where the bodies are buried. He helped bury them. Meadows, from what has been reported, was in, if not orchestrating, the fake elector scheme. Meadows was, from what we are reading, helped organize the phony slate of electors in battleground states. If he flips and says he was following Trump's orders, you can't find a more consequential and material witness to prove Trump conspired to defraud the United States government by sending false electors to Congress. We're talking about Mark Meadows, the White House chief of staff. His office is right off the side of the Oval Office. Meadows could possibly have spilled everything to the grand jury about the White House, not just coordinating with the phony electors, but coordinating with the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, those extrajudicial thugs who stormed the Capitol on January 6th and are now doing time for seditious conspiracy. I don't know if I've ever mentioned this on the show, but the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers are doing time for seditious conspiracy. And Cassidy Hutchinson testified that the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, their names were bandied about in the Oval Office in the lead up to January 6th. Cassidy Hutchinson worked right underneath Mark Meadows. And if Mark Meadows was the eyes and the ears of the White House, serving as Trump's chief of staff, Cassidy Hutchinson was Mark Meadows' eyes and ears. She saw everything Mark Meadows saw, and because of her proximity to the Oval Office, she saw things Mark Meadows didn't see. She cooperated with the January 6th committee, and we know she's cooperating with special counsel Jack Smith. She told the January 6th Select Committee that days before the insurrection, Mark Meadows warned her it was going to get violent on January 6th, and yet he did nothing to stop it. Instead, he stoked it. It was reported a year ago that Chief of Staff Mark Meadows incinerated papers while he was in the White House. We don't know if it was in the lead up to January 6th or right after January 6th, but he incinerated papers after a meeting he had held with Pennsylvania Congressman Scott Perry. Why is the White House Chief of Staff allegedly destroying White House papers? Evidence that documents his meeting with Congressman Scott Perry, who, according to January 6 Vice Chair, the January 6 Committee Vice Chair Liz Cheney, according to Liz Cheney, Congressman Scott Perry begged Donald Trump for a pardon after January 6 failed insurrection. Why would Congressman Scott Perry beg Donald Trump for a pardon after January 6th? Well, first off, Scott Perry insists he didn't ask for a pardon, okay? But we do know the FBI last year stopped him on the street, stopped Congressman Scott Perry on the street with a warrant and seized his cell phone. We only know what special counsel Jack Smith is leaking and what we heard during the January 6th Select Committee hearings. We do know that there is testimony that right after the 2020 presidential election, Congressman Scott Perry introduced Donald Trump and most likely his chief of staff, Mark Meadows, to this guy, Jeffrey Clark. I know it's hard to keep track of these people, but this is really important. Jeffrey Clark is a consequential figure in the prosecution of Donald Trump. Jeffrey Clark was a low-level Justice Department official working in the civil division of the Justice Department. Nobody really knew who he was. I believe he's a Harvard Law School graduate. And in the waning days of the Trump presidency, in the lead up to January 6, Jeffrey Clark appears to have been more than willing to not just spread election fraud conspiracy theories like Italian satellites altering Dominion voting machines to switch Trump votes to Biden votes. He was not only willing to spread those falsehoods, he was willing to use his legal authority in the Justice Department to act on these false claims. He was willing to act on these false claims so much so that days before January 6, Donald Trump was prepared to name Jeffrey Clark as acting attorney general so that Jeffrey Clark could mobilize the entire Justice Department to prove rampant voter fraud, even though none existed. And Jeffrey Clark knew none existed. And remember, if he knew that voter fraud didn't exist, but used any of his powers within the Justice Department to mobilize, say, phony electors or strong-arm election officials, then that proves criminal intent. Jeffrey Clark, there are disbarment hearings going on right now, and he almost became acting attorney general days before January 6. According to the Hatch Act, it is illegal for Donald Trump, Mark Meadows, or Jeffrey Clark to coerce top-level Justice Department attorneys into pushing a partisan political agenda to alter the results of an election. It is illegal under the Hatch Act for Jeffrey Clark, either as a low-level Department of Justice official or as he was hoping to become acting attorney general. It is illegal for Mark Meadows, chief of staff, or Donald Trump. It is illegal to strong-arm, to coerce high-level Justice Department attorneys into executing a political agenda in order to alter the results of an election. It's criminal. I don't know much. I think most of you know that by now. But I do know that the attempt to make Jeffrey Clark the acting attorney general for the sole purpose of prosecuting non-existent voter fraud, I know it is a criminal violation of the Hatch Act, and it doesn't matter. I don't think it matters that Trump and Mark Meadows failed to appoint Clark as acting attorney general. They were blocked by the entire Justice Department, which threatened to resign if Jeffrey Clark became the acting attorney general. The fact that he was blocked from committing a crime doesn't mean they didn't conspire to commit this crime. If you walk into a bank, if you conspire to rob a bank but are stopped before you get the money, you're still guilty of trying to rob the bank. And all this because Mark Meadows is at the top of this, right next to Donald Trump. Nobody comes closer. Nobody, not Jared Kushner, not Ivanka, nobody else stuck by Donald Trump's side so tightly and for so long after the 2020 presidential election. At least nobody who was employed by the government. Okay? You have Rudy, you have other outside lawyers who came in, but there were only two people working in the government who in the executive branch who stuck with Donald Trump to the bitter end. Mark Meadows and Jeffrey Clark, who wanted to become acting attorney general. And this is why Mark Meadows is in so much trouble. It's why nobody has heard from him in months. It's why it appears, at least to me, he's cooperating with the special counsel, Jack Smith. He's been forced to. The judge said you have to testify, no executive privilege. And as I've been saying, if Mark Meadows becomes a witness for the prosecution, a cooperating witness, or an immunized witness, and I suspect that's about to happen, then Jack Smith, the special counsel, should have no trouble convincing a jury that Donald Trump didn't just conspire, but ordered his inferiors in the executive branch to participate in, one, a massive conspiracy to raise money based on the lie that the 2020 election had been stolen and that would be wire fraud. Two, he ordered them to use that lie to defraud the United States government by orchestrating the meeting of the so-called fake electors in 7 key battleground states that Joe Biden won. He ordered them, along with Mark Meadows, to send fake certificates, forged documents claiming that these fake electors were the duly appointed electors, which they weren't. It's fraud. 3, that Trump illegally pressured Mike Pence, that Trump illegally, along with Mark Meadows, illegally pressured Vice President Mike Pence under, as they say, the color of the law, under the authority vested in Trump, and to some degree Mark Meadows, under the authority invested in them by the Constitution. They were strong-arming Pence into violating the Electoral Count Act of 1877, as well as the 12th Amendment. They were telling him to refuse to certify the election for Joe Biden on January 6th. And that's illegal. Number 4, they conspired with armed thugs like the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers to use violence to stop a government proceeding, which is against the law. As well, they conspired with them to engage in seditious conspiracy, possibly instigate an insurrection. Insurrection is going to be a little tricky to try to prove in a court of law, but you could. You could prove that it was an insurrection against the United States government. If anyone, and here's the thing that I think we all have to understand in the lead up to these prosecutions, there's only one person who is as guilty of all this as Donald Trump is. One person is as guilty for all these crimes as Donald Trump is, and that is his chief of staff, Mark Meadows. Now, we all heard that illegal call that Trump made to Raffensperger, the Georgia Secretary of State, a Republican who voted for Trump. We all heard that illegal call urging him to find votes for Trump. Mark Meadows was in on that call. He arranged that call. His son, Mark Meadows' son, is a lawyer in Georgia who was dispatched to find evidence of voter fraud. We are now reading reports that Meadows' son informed him no voter fraud in Georgia. That means criminal intent. If everyone in the White House, including Mark Meadows and Donald Trump, they were all told there was no voter fraud. That's criminal intent. If you honestly think there's voter fraud, then there's a way to avoid a conviction. But if everyone working in the White House tells Mark Meadows and Donald Trump there's no voter fraud, there's criminal intent. By January 2nd, they had lost more than 60 voter fraud cases around the country. By the time Trump and Meadows were on that phone call with the Georgia Secretary of State, claiming voter fraud, ordering him, threatening him to find more votes for Trump, every paid employee at the top level of the executive branch had told Donald Trump and Mark Meadows there was no voter fraud. Every single top-level employee in the executive branch, except Jeffrey Clark in the Justice Department, told Donald Trump and Mark Meadows there is no election fraud. Everybody in the executive branch, from Homeland Security to two separate attorney generals, Bill Barr and Rod Rosen, to the White House counsel, Cipollone, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Everybody on the payroll at the top of the executive branch told Donald Trump and Mark Meadows that voter fraud was non-existent. That proves criminal intent. The only people working at the top of the executive branch who kept pushing voter fraud, there were three people who kept pushing voter fraud. Jeffrey Clark, who wanted to become the acting attorney general, Mark Meadows, the White House chief of staff, and Donald Trump. Everybody else who was paid by the government said no voter fraud. Now, voter fraud was promoted by outside counsel. Rudy Giuliani, he wasn't working for the government. Sidney Powell, Kenneth Chesebro, John Eastman, and Ginny Thomas, Clarence's wife, who was constantly texting Mark Meadows, telling him this was a fight between good and evil. All of them were employed by Trump, but they were not high-level executive branch government officials. I cannot stress this enough. The entire executive branch across all the agencies, from Homeland Security, the FBI, the Justice Department, all populated by loyal Republicans, everyone except for Jeffrey Clark, Mark Meadows, and Donald Trump, they all said there was no voter fraud. That's criminal. That proves criminal intent. It proves that Mark Meadows, Donald Trump, and Jeffrey Clark, who wanted to be the acting attorney general, it proves they knew they had lost that they lost, that voter fraud wasn't real. And we're now, I'll get to more of this. There's now evidence of Mark Meadows being told by his son and admitting that voter fraud was non-existent. There's also testimony of, I think it was Cassidy Hutchinson, who heard Donald Trump say in the lead up to January 6th, I can't believe I lost to that idiot, Joe Biden. Okay? Attorney General Bill Barr told Donald Trump before he quit in December of 2020, Attorney General Bill Barr told Donald Trump the voter fraud claims were quote unquote bullshit. That proves Mark Meadows and Donald Trump had criminal intent, which is why Mark Meadows is in so much trouble unless he flips and becomes a cooperating witness or an immunized witness. And if he flips, or if Jeffrey Clark, who wanted to be acting attorney general, if he flips, 70 million MAGA supporters can take to the streets and riot in support of Donald Trump. It doesn't matter. He's going to prison. And I cannot help but believe Mark Meadows right now is dropping to his knees and begging special counsel Jack Smith not to prosecute him. This wouldn't be the first time that Mark Meadows dropped to his knees. He famously dropped to his knees before Speaker John Boehner. This is true. Dropped to his knees and begged John Boehner to forgive him, to forgive Meadows for the role that Mark Meadows played in 2015's failed coup, that's what they call it, a failed coup, to replace Boehner with a Freedom Caucus hardliner. Mark Meadows is one of the founders of the Freedom Caucus, and he tried to vacate the chair, get rid of John Boehner, and when it backfired, Meadows panicked, went into the Speaker's office, and literally dropped to his knees and begged for forgiveness. He's a rat. Mark Meadows is a rat. He's stupid, he's immoral, and he's a self-dealer. And if Jack Smith, the special counsel, is squeezing Meadows, Meadows is going to squeal. I have to believe that. And right now, Smith's office, special counsel Jack Smith's office, is letting out little bits and pieces. He's leaking about Meadows' criminal intent, which suggests that Meadows might not yet have flipped, which is maybe why the indictments have not yet come down yet. I believe the reason we haven't seen these indictments yet is Jack Smith is trying to get Meadows to flip before Trump's indictment. This is the handiwork, I believe, of the special counsel's office. What happened? Why are you doing this to me? Hang on. This came out over the weekend. We learned, and I have to believe this was leaked by Jack Smith's office to get Meadows scared and to get him to flip. We learned that Mark Meadows openly admitted to staffers in the White House in the lead up to January 6th that there was no election fraud. Wait, it got worse for Meadows. The Washington Post broke this story on Saturday, reporting that what the hell is going on? That the Washington Post broke this story on Saturday, reporting that Jack Smith's office has in its possession a series of texts in which Mark Meadows, in the lead up to January 6th, joked about Donald Trump's voter fraud claims. Why is this important? It serves as material evidence, written texts, proving criminal intent. If you have evidence that Mark Meadows was joking about voter fraud, that he knew the claims were bogus, yet he still went ahead with a phony elector scheme. He still went ahead with plans to undermine the Justice Department by encouraging Trump to appoint Jeffrey Clark as acting Attorney General in order to turn the Justice Department into a voter fraud propaganda machine. If he was doing all that while openly admitting that the voter fraud claims were bogus, that proves criminal intent. He told the Georgia Secretary of State during that infamous call that he had evidence of voter fraud, while we now know that his own son, Mark Meadows, told the Secretary of State of Georgia that he had evidence of voter fraud while he had already received information from his own son in Georgia that there was no evidence of voter fraud. That's criminal intent. If he went ahead with plans to pressure Mike Pence into not certifying the election on January 6th, if he made calls to members of Congress urging them not to certify, claiming voter fraud and knowing that was a lie, if he knew the claims were false but helped organize Trump's January 6th rally on the ellipse, knowing that high-ranking members of Trump's legal team like Sidney Powell, Rudy Giuliani, and Roger Stone, as well as General Michael Flynn, were coordinating on the ground with members of the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, if he knew the election had not been stolen but still participated in all this, helped Trump orchestrate a conspiracy to spread the voter fraud lie in order to defraud the United States government, block a government proceeding through coercion and violence, if he destroyed evidence, he burnt documents after his meeting with Congressman Scott Perry, all of that proves criminal intent. And I think the reason, I think the reason we haven't seen the Trump indictment come down yet is because Smith, Special Counsel Jack Smith, is still twisting Mark Meadows' arm, squeezing him to go all in and become a witness for the prosecution. And I cannot stress this enough. If Special Counsel Jack Smith gets Mark Meadows to flip, then he gets it all. He gets Trump on dereliction of duty for January 6th and failure to uphold his oath to protect the Constitution of the United States. We know from testimony during the January 6th committee that while the Capitol was under siege, while White House staffers were beseeching Mark Meadows to get the president to call off the attack, that Meadows sat in his office telling people like Trump's White House counsel, quote, "There's nothing I can do." Trump doesn't believe, this is a quote from the Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows. This is what he said when everybody from Donald Trump Jr. to Sean Hannity to the White House counsel were on the phone with Mark Meadows trying to get him to tell Trump to call off the attack dogs. Mark Meadows reportedly said, "There's nothing I can do." This is while the Capitol is being attacked. He says, "There's nothing I can do." Trump doesn't believe the people storming the Capitol are doing anything wrong, and that Trump believes, quote, "Mike Pence deserves to be hanged." This is incredible. Trump had a constitutional responsibility to protect Congress, not just to call off the insurrection, but use his emergency powers to call in the National Guard. But he refused. He refused. It was Mike Pence, the odious Mike Pence, hiding in the Capitol, who was on the phone with Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, trying to coordinate a rescue mission. When chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, finally got Mark Meadows on the line, while all this was going on, while the insurrection was going on, The very first thing, according to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, the very first thing out of Mark Meadows' mouth was not, how do we protect Congress from these marauders? How do we help the police? The very first thing out of Mark Meadows' mouth was, how do we control the narrative? How do we control the narrative? Meadows, according to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Meadows was more worried about the narrative being fed to the media. He was more worried that the media was picking up on a narrative that Mike Pence was calling the shots. It's incredible. Mark Meadows, Trump's loyal henchman to the bitter end, wasn't concerned about saving the lives of the Capitol police officers, saving the life of Mike Pence or Nancy Pelosi. His only concern, the only concern of this demented sociopath, Mark Meadows, was, how do we make it look like Donald Trump is still in command, so that when and if the troops ever do rescue everyone in the Capitol, it will look like Donald Trump ordered this and not Mike Pence. Meadows is a piece of work. He followed Trump's every command, every step of the way. If Donald Trump is guilty, Mark Meadows is guilty for pretty much the same exact crimes, pretty much, which is why I suspect when Jack Smith hands down this next set of indictments, it will either include Mark Meadows or he will be a witness for the prosecution. If it happens, if Mark Meadows cooperates with Jack Smith, it is over for Donald Trump. I'm not one of those people who says, we got him this time. I really don't say that. I've always said, I don't think Donald Trump will ever go to prison. I still don't believe they'll lock him up. But if Mark Meadows, keep your eye on the disposition of Mark Meadows. If Mark Meadows flips, I don't think Trump will be able to find a lawyer to defend him. I think he's going to have to drop out of the race, and I think Joe Biden pardons him. That's what I think. I am always wrong, by the way, so disregard everything I just said. How am I doing on time? Okay. I don't have time to talk about Israel. I'll talk about Israel tomorrow. Thanks to the fascistic Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel is now lurching not just to the right, but towards an authoritarian state. Well, it already is an authoritarian state for Palestinians living in the West Bank, but now there is a battle for democracy in a country that more and more people around the world, including American Jews, are beginning to fear is less democratic. A lot of the citizens of Israel fear that Israel is falling under the fascist boot heel of Benjamin Netanyahu. There's talk of a civil war in Israel right now. Benjamin Netanyahu is a fascist. He is I believe, the longest-serving prime minister of Israel. In my limited time with you, I want to talk about a very important organization called Project Democracy. It is a bipartisan nonprofit that monitors the march towards authoritarianism around the world and here in America. It's called projectdemocracy.org. Go there. Some of my favorite authors sit on the board of Protect Democracy. Authors like Timothy Snyder, Stephen Levitsky, and Anne Applebaum, who have all written extensively on how democracies die. It's really valuable. Check out protectdemocracy.org. They put together a very sophisticated and highly reliable monitor to keep track of democracies around the world, including America, and the threat levels each one faces. The threat levels go from 1 to 5. 1 means it's a low-level threat. Democracy in a country that is at a 1 is safe. 5 is catastrophic, meaning the country has lost its democracy. So it goes low threat, significant threat, severe threat, critical threat, and catastrophic. America, just so you know, currently gets a 2.2 out of 5, which means we have a significant threat to our democracy right now, but we're not teetering into the abyss. This is really important. This is why you need to check out protectdemocracy.org, because they're not alarmists. They're sober-minded authors and professors who study the rise and fall of democracies around the country, around the world. They're not saying the sky is falling here in America, just chunks of it. And the reason I'm talking about this is partly because it's good news. I happen to think it's good news that we're not at 5. Sometimes it feels like it. For example, as of today, the democracies in Canada and Germany have a threat level listed as low, while India has a threat level listed as severe. The United States and Great Britain are listed at a significant threat level. And to make these assessments, the experts at Protect Democracy use 5 yardsticks to track the threats to a democracy. Those yardsticks are 1, freedom of the press; 2, concentration of power in the executive branch; 3, free and open elections; 4, the erosion of civil liberties, like measuring the ability to protest without police harassment, like that. And then there's civil violence, for example, the rise of extrajudicial right-wing thugs, like, say, Roger Rittenhouse, who shows up at a Black Lives Matter with an AR-15 while police give him a wink and a nod. And finally, the last yardstick is rhetoric being deployed by far-right politicians and office holders. According to protectdemocracy.org, the threat to American democracy is listed as severe, with 4 categories listed as under significant threat. I don't know if that is correct. I don't think it's the threat to American democracy, I believe, is under significant threat. But in other categories, for example, in America, our elections, our civil liberties, threats of civic violence and rhetoric have been measured as being at significant risk threat levels. Again, above significant is critical and then catastrophic. One of the good deeds, I know that didn't make any sense. I apologize. That was just me trying to read off a chart, and it was complete hogwash. I apologize. One of the good deeds performed by protectdemocracy.org is they canonize, and this is really important. Please pay attention to this. Let me just get some water. They canonize the authoritarian playbook. And I got to wrap it up, but this is what we need to remind ourselves of every day. There is a playbook. There is a fascist playbook. There is an authoritarian playbook. I'm going to assume most of you already know it. The Republican Party is working off a script followed by countless fascist leaders, as well as their parties and henchmen since the time of Mussolini and before. And we need to recognize the playbook and the plays in that playbook. And we need to call it out when we see it. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up, but these are the 7 moves that have been identified as part of the authoritarian playbook. Politicizing, number one, politicizing independent institutions, okay? During the height of COVID, for example, Donald Trump politicized the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases under the leadership of Dr. Fauci, right? Trump and the Republicans were embarrassed by how they completely dropped the ball on COVID. So instead of taking the blame, they politicized the independent institution like the NIH or the CDC. These are reliable, patriotic institutions that are beholden to the people, not Trump. So they were embarrassing Trump. Trump demeans and politicizes Fauci. They insist the FBI, the Justice Department are weaponized. They say that that is how they politicize an independent institution. The FBI, they're not saints, but what the fascists do is they politicize the Justice Department. Christopher Wray, the head of the FBI, is a Republican appointed by Donald Trump. He's an independent leader, but because he's investigating Trump, the Republicans accuse the FBI of being politicized, and that undermines the people's faith in democratic institutions. This is all part of the authoritarian playbook: spreading disinformation, lying, alternative facts, alternative truths. As Steve Bannon calls it, flooding the end zone with bullshit. The right-wing authoritarian propaganda machine just doesn't spread lies. It spreads confusion, bits and pieces and scraps of information, half-truths, to leave most Americans dumbfounded and feeling stupid. For example, the Hunter Biden laptop. Does anybody understand that story? If you ask a Trump supporter what the laptop revealed, they'll say a massive conspiracy on the Biden crime family's behalf to steal $100 million from foreign governments. And when you ask for what specifically is in the laptop to prove that, they can only cite an email referring to Joe Biden as the big guy. We need money for the big guy. What they leave out is this is a laptop belonging to a self-confessed crack addict who was hanging out with prostitutes, drinking, destroying his life, committing slow-motion suicide. But his emails sent at the same exact time while he's on this suicidal bender, the emails we're supposed to believe are businesslike and sober, that they're realistic plans to enrich the Biden crime family. We're supposed to believe that Joe Biden trusted his crack addict son, who was teetering on death. We're supposed to believe that while all that was going on, he's making porn films, his teeth are rotted out from either meth or cocaine. But throughout all that, we're supposed to believe that Joe Biden read the email sent by Hunter at the time and saw it as rational thought and ideas, business ideas that should be acted upon. Another playbook, another play from the playbook. Aggrandizing executive power, weakening checks and balances. Big story last week in the New York Times. Donald Trump isn't messing around. If he gets reelected, God forbid, he's going to lay off half the executive branch and just invoke the unitary theory of the executive branch, which Bill Barr is a strong proponent of, where the president is king. There are people who serve in our government, upstanding members of our government, like Bill Barr, who believe in the unitary power of the executive branch, who don't believe in democracy. They believe in pretty much making the president the king. What else is in the authoritarian playbook? Quashing criticism or dissent. Are you going to? There you go. That's obvious, right? This isn't so obvious, marginalizing vulnerable communities. It's what Hitler did. It's what Mussolini did. It's what DeSantis is doing in Florida, picking on the transgender community and African Americans. It's all about the othering of people. This is what fascists do because they don't have a majority. Most people hate fascists. Hitler did not win in March of 1933. He had a plurality. He didn't have enough votes. But what fascists do when they don't have a majority is they other people. They other the blacks, the gays, the Hispanics, the Arabs, the Jews. They say they're not really Americans. Their votes don't count. And then they scapegoat them. This is all part of the authoritarian playbook. Corrupting elections. I just talked nonstop about Trump's corrupting of the 2020 elections, shamelessly. And of course, finally, and this is important, we forget about this, stoking violence. What is striking about January 6th is not just the violence we saw on that day. What is underreported in the lead-up to January 6th is the violence directed at Republicans before January 6th, violence directed at Republicans who refused to help Donald Trump steal the election. Mike Pence was going to be killed on January 6th. They came with ropes. They came with gallows. This is a fact. Mike Pence's Secret Service detail on January 6th was screaming into the phone, leaving messages with their central command, telling them to call their families and tell them they love them. It was like a hijacked plane on 9/11. Secret Service agents who were part of Mike Pence's detail were leaving messages with their loved ones saying, I love you. In the lead up to January 6th, Mike Pence's chief of staff and his counsel, his attorney, alerted the Secret Service that they feared for Mike Pence's life once he went ahead and defied Trump's orders not to certify the election. Remember I said earlier that Mark Meadows, the chief of staff in the lead up to January 6th, told his assistant Cassidy Hutchinson that January 6th is going to be violent? You have Mike Pence's attorney and his chief of staff alerting the Secret Service saying that Mike Pence is going to disobey Trump's order and not certify the election, and not decertify the election on January 6th, and we're worried for his physical safety. It's not just Mike Pence, and this is an underreported story. On December 30th, 2020, the Republican Speaker of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives was being pressured by Trump, by Rudy Giuliani, to convene a special session to reverse the popular will of the voters in Pennsylvania and award Pennsylvania's electoral votes to Trump, even though Trump lost the popular vote. Brian Cutler is the name of the Republican Speaker, and he refused. Hundreds of protesters immediately showed up outside his office, then outside his home. That was followed by all his personal information getting doxxed by Trump supporters. His cell phone number, his home address, and his home phone number were doxxed. His home phone number had to be switched off because it wouldn't stop ringing with life-threatening messages. This is a Republican. In Georgia, where an indictment is expected to be handed down in August by Fani Willis, the Secretary of State, Republican Brad Raffensperger, after conducting 3 recounts and found Joe Biden won Georgia, Raffensperger refused to take Trump's calls, to take Mark Meadows' calls. They wouldn't stop calling him. They finally got through to him, but after he refused to do what Trump ordered him to do, was find, one more vote than Biden has. His personal information was doxed. His life was threatened. His wife received text messages which threatened to rape her. His son had just died. So his son's widow began receiving threatening calls, and her home was broken into while Raffensperger's grandkids from his deceased son were sleeping in there. The entire family, the Secretary of State of Georgia, Raffensperger, his entire family had to go into hiding for 2 weeks. Arizona Secretary of State Katie Hobbs is a Democrat. She told Reuters she continues to receive death threats for certifying. Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, a Democrat who faced armed protesters outside her home before January 6, received death threats because she was challenging the election. Trump's version of the election. Republican Majority Leader of the Michigan State Senate, Mike Shirkey, refused to cooperate with Trump and the phony elector scheme. He said after he refused to cooperate, he received 4,000 text messages. Trump supporters docked his personal information. Republican Speaker of the Arizona House of Representatives, Rusty Bowers, Republican, refused to cooperate with Trump on the phony elector scheme. 20,000 emails flooded his inbox, thousands of voicemails and texts, and trucks outside his home at all hours of the night with loudspeakers blaring, accusing him of being a pedophile. Those are the top Republicans and some of the top Democrats in states like Arizona, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. It was even worse for low-level election workers whose lives were under constant assault from armed Trump supporters. Would you be an election official? This is all part of the authoritarian playbook, stoking violence. Who needs the hassle, right? Why challenge Donald Trump if people are going to break into your home, threaten to kill your family? This is the authoritarian playbook. Let's review. This is it. Let me go full screen here. This is the authoritarian playbook. 1, politicizing independent institutions. Pay attention when you read the news, when you see what Jim Jordan is doing, Kevin McCarthy, Ron DeSantis, politicizing independent institutions. Why does this not work? Let's try it again. Here we go. Politicizing independent institutions, spreading disinformation, Fox News, right? Aggrandizing executive power, weakening checks and balances. We've read about Trump's plan when he's reelected to just give as much power to the Oval Office as you possibly can. Quashing criticism or dissent, obviously. Marginalizing vulnerable communities. You see what Ron DeSantis is doing in Florida. Corrupting elections. Well, that speaks for itself. And stoking violence. Those are the moves. Those are the 7 moves. Learn them. Pay attention to them. It's being deployed by Republicans. Unquestionably. It's being deployed by Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel, Orban in Hungary, Putin in Russia. We saw Bolsonaro do this in Brazil. They all work off the same playbook and say the same exact things. The reason authoritarians push American exceptionalism is so we don't pay attention to other authoritarian regimes around the world. When you push American exceptionalism, you say, there's nobody like us. What happens in America is different from every other country in the world. So we go, I'm not going to pay attention to what's happening in Poland. I'm not going to pay attention to Hungary. to Brazil, to Russia. I'm not going to pay attention because we're exceptional. If you don't believe in American exceptionalism, you realize we're no different from any other democracy, including Italy, Germany, and Spain in the 30s. It can happen anywhere, and it will happen here in America. Go to protectingdemocracy.org. Check the site out. Pay attention to the playbook, what they're doing. We're not there yet. We're several steps away from losing this democracy. Learn the playbook. Learn it. Teach it to your friends and your kids. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. You know the drill. I'm running out of steam. Let me thank everybody in the chat room for keeping the conversation civilized. Please leave a comment. If you think I got something wrong, please tell me. Leave a comment. Please share this with your friends through social media or email. Please like the video. That helps a lot. And please subscribe to my channel. I will be conducting office hours when I'm at 100%. I'm not sick. That was just, I need water. I'm fine. I just had some kidney stones. I don't have as much energy yet, so I'm not doing my newsletter, but subscribe to it anyway. And I will be conducting, holding office hours when I have the energy. Thank you for your kind words, and I will see you